As a journalist and documentary maker, I tell stories. But I should be honest, because I really don't tell my own story often. I tell other people's story. I retell their stories. And as most things in life, a lot of these stories are about love and hate, or something in between. So the next 15 minutes, I'll be talking about just that. Hate media and love radio. Constructive journalism versus destructive journalism. About what design can do for journalism, but also what Africa can do for Europe. But let me first start by showing you a clip from one of our projects called Love Radio.
Rwanda, 20 years after the genocide. On the same frequency that hate radio once incited people to kill their neighbors, radio soap Musika Weya now broadcasts a message of reconciliation. Every week, thousands of Rwandans tune in to follow the story of two villages that are trapped in a downward spiral of jealousy, hatred, and violence. In both villages, bad guys try to convince their neighbors that the others are responsible for their misery. One of them is Rutaganira, a bitter, angry man. Only his mother, Zaninga, is more negative. Fortunately, there are also good guys who try to bring the villages together again, like Shema and Batamuriza. In the midst of rising tensions, these young heroes even fall in love. However, as members of rival villages, their love is as forbidden as Romeo and Juliet's. Every Tuesday evening, narrator Antoinette welcomes the listeners to the show. Let me tell you this fascinating tale in episodes of love and hate.
So, Love Radio is a transmedia documentary about the process of reconciliation in post-genocide Rwanda. And it's based around this very popular Rwandan soap opera called Musika Weya, A New Dawn. It consists of a web documentary, interactive, short stories, especially made for mobile phone and tablet, and an exhibition, and also a TV documentary. It combines film, photography, archive material, and text. And as you can see, great design. So the project, made in 2014 together with Anouk Stekete and a big team of creatives, among others designers Kummer and Herman, tells a universal tale or story about fact and fiction, about forgiving and forgiveness, violence and reconciliation. And this radio soap, Musika Weya, is broadcast every week on Radio 1 of Rwanda, so the #1 radio station. And it really has thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Rwandans listening to it every week. So if you first listen to it, it really sounds like your average soap opera with intrigue and like bad guys, villains like Rutaganira that you just saw, but also this romance between Romeo and Juliet. But then actually the show wants to do something else. It is supposed to really just do something more than entertain, but convey messages to people about how violence, and especially group violence, starts, and also about how it can be prevented. So this serial, which was first started in 2004 by the Dutch foundation Radio La Benevolencia, together with the Rwandan theater makers and actors, is based on a theory of an American psychologist called Erwin Staub, who dedicated his life in researching how this group violence, genocide, come into being. I really think it's an amazing example of a cooperation between African, American and European storytellers and scientists. So the first time I was in Rwanda together with photographer Anouk Stekete, some behind the scene images, was in 2009. We worked there on a different project. By the way, Anouk was 7 months pregnant, as you can see, still climbing those hills and using the boda boda as a means of transportation. Well, there's some other ones, me with kids hanging around. And always we work with some local people helping us out for doing the photography. So, but when we were there for the first time, we came in contact with lots and lots of NGOs, both Rwandan and foreign NGOs, working on reconciliation. And a lot of these reconciliation projects were meant well, but they were really top-down, and sometimes felt superficial or even forced. But Musikaweya was really different. It was highly popular. We could just tell that by just asking around in the street, do you know this show? Everybody knew it. And the show receives stacks and stacks of fan mail every week. More recently, that became like text messaging. So we came to visit the team behind the serial. And we actually saw how they rehearsed in the garden. They have this beautiful garden. We saw how they recorded their serial. And we talked to a lot of the actors and the creators. And it was like, for example, the director, this is one of the directors, Andre, who was directing the show, but also one of the bad guys, Ruta Ganera. He's really a bad guy. In real life, he's called Dismas and a very nice man, by the way. And we talked to Charles. And let's just listen to 2 of the creators for a short clip.
On est dans une fiction, les gens sont emportés par cette fiction, mais aussi il y a pas mal de réalité dedans. Mais d'une façon dose, c'est petit à petit. Il y a quelque chose qui reste, parce que les gens, quand ils écoutent, ils s'identifient un peu. Ils disent, ça, c'est moi, je suis comme ça. Ou quand on dit ça, je vois quelqu'un qui fait comme ça.
Ce qu'on a voulu enseigner aux gens, c'est que même s'il y a eu des problèmes, même s'il y a eu un génocide, on peut enseigner les gens comment cohabiter pacifiquement.
So that's a really important message in a country still coping with the effects of the genocide that took place in 1994. I mean, what happened brings up a lot of questions. Why were so many people swept up in this violence? What role did media play? And how can people now cope with that past and live together again? So after meeting the Musikaweya team, we really wanted to retell their story. And so we set out to translate this Rwandan soap in Kinyarwanda to a Western audience. And starting point in the project became sort of the relation between this fictive story of the soap and the reality in Rwanda, which is much more complex. And together with the makers, the creators of the soap, we selected the key scenes. That was quite a big task because they've been doing this show for 10 years and made over 500 episodes. And we cut it back to 7 times 8 minutes as an online show. And as you can see, we wanted to show both the soap opera, the story, but we also wanted to show what is really going on in Rwanda. And so we chose this 2-layered mode for the website, for the web documentary, on air and off air. So on air we show you the story, you get to get an idea of the soap opera, but then at certain times you can go off air and go to the lower level. That's where you can find a glimpse of what is going on to make the radio documentary, but also to hear more about the complexity of life in Rwanda. Because of course the soap, well, ends with happy notes or love stories and intrigue, but real life reconciliation is much more complicated. So in this sense, Love Radio really sort of straddles the boundary between fiction and reality. And in a way, like when you look at the series and you go in depth on the off-air layer, slowly but surely you find out, of course, there's not one truth, but there are just a lot of different versions of reality. As I said before, it was really like a team effort, and we created this with a bunch of creatives. We always do that with our projects. So here you can see us looking at things a little bit later. Designers, Kummer and Herman, interactive designer Sarah Kolster, and the programmers. And I think this is really important. You know, it's not just about what story you want to tell, but also how you tell a story. And that was also something that we really learned from the Rwandan makers. When there was the 20th anniversary of the genocide, a lot of documentaries and a lot of books or publications that came out were really just in stark, like black and white pictures, focusing on the horror mostly. But Musikawea uses drama, suspense, and especially humor to convey their message. And just as the Rwandan makers did that, we also wanted to use, like a more light-hearted way to share this tough story. And I think the designers really did a great job to show that content, to have this very simple, undercooled, and at the same time theatrical design. So one of the main aspects of our story that we wanted to tell was the role of media in society and its destructive power. And the use of propaganda, as you can see, your time has come, cockroaches, to really reduce the other to the enemy, is a recurring phenomenon. And it's not just in Rwanda, it's not just in countries far away. So we also have to ask ourselves, why do we have this need to create this distance to the other? And how can we deal with that? I mean, we all know that the genocide in Rwanda is not unique. So that brings me to another project I shortly wanted to share some ideas about. But just first look at a clip.
Last year was a total chaos. 6-7 countries decided they could wave through people. It led to a situation where people thought they had the right to choose which country of asylum they can apply to.
Because she loves
The vast majority went to Germany, to Sweden, to Austria, and you could see an increase in other countries, but an increase that was manageable in all the countries, including in the Netherlands. Substantial increase, but still manageable. But then the image on the TV screen that you get is masses of people moving through border without any control, governments absolutely unable to do anything about it.
Ze komen in steeds grotere getalen naar Europa.
endless river refugees.
The flow of refugees.
Nederland kan toestroom vluchtelingen amper aan.
The influx of asylum seekers has brought health concerns to Europe.
Goedenavond. Zouden er tussen de vluchtelingen die hier naartoe komen IS-strijders zitten?
You see a race to the bottom in a number of European countries to look as unattractive as possible, with the hope that the asylum seekers would go next door.
The problem is not a European problem. The problem is a German problem. Nobody would like to stay in Hungary.
This is short term because elections are coming up, so you need to satisfy part of your public opinion, say that you're playing tough, you manage your border, and you deflect the problem onto the neighbor.
Look, this is very testing, I accept that, because you've got a swarm of people coming across the Mediterranean.
And then people that are not xenophobe, they scare.
So this was a clip from our TV documentary, The Asielzoekmachine. And that word is sort of a play on the word asylum machine and search engine. So that refers both to the sort of bureaucratic nature of asylum policies and the online component of our project. And asylum search engine or Asielzoekmachine is a huge multimedia, multi-platform project that we started to really explore the complexity of Dutch asylum policy. We believe that we live in a democratic society where we share the responsibility for our asylum policy. But if you don't really understand it, if it became so complex that you can't comprehend it, how can you even know that that policy is right or not? So we aim to unravel that complexity and pose the questions, how does it work? And how do we want it to work? So it, again, of course, like all the projects we do, consists of different aspects. It's a website, it's lots of exhibitions, it's a TV documentary, it's public brainstorms. And it really brings together journalism, documentary film, public debates, an extensive web documentary in which you can go through all the phases of, well, the phases that asylum seekers in the Netherlands usually have to go through. So we also shift to different perspectives, showing the perspective of the asylum seeker, government officials, but also people working for NGOs. And we show these dilemmas lying behind the policies to our viewer. And we ask them, do you have a solution can you think with us to find solutions? So, and that's really what we did for the last couple of months. Really the same actually as just as what design can do refugee challenge. We didn't want to look at just the problems, so to say, of the refugee crisis, of the refugee situation in Europe, but really look at the solutions. So throughout the whole project, we asked the audience to respond. We just asked them, like, do you have an idea? Come up with your own idea. Go beyond the polarization on this debate. That went through the web documentary, but also these public debates. And in the end, we hope that all these ideas we bring together and we bring to the executive organizations and policymakers to show people are willing to rethink our policies. We're still working on it. Last week we had our sort of end result with lots of politicians and lots of policymakers, and we're going on to really find ways to make it work, maybe even also with Refugee Challenge together. So, in a way, it's like a form of constructive journalism, what we did here. And it's like both a way to have your audience look beyond their own often strong opinions, but also really to find solution. And of course you can ask yourself, is that still journalism or is that activism? Well, a former chief of a well-known Dutch, very conservative right-wing newspaper, De Telegraaf, criticized the project. And I quote him, he said, "Journalists that want to make the world a better place are dangerous." Okay, he was an old grumpy man, so I didn't take it too personal, but still, I mean, it does raise questions. Can you be both objective and at the same time try to activate your audience to come up with new solutions? I mean, these are questions that we did struggle with. But to call journalists, and also designers for that matter, who look beyond the day-to-day media reality dangerous, I mean, that's just absurd. But it's also detrimental to innovative storytelling. Because I really think that it is necessary to always continually rethink our role as storytellers and to keep reinventing the way we tell these stories and use media. And not just because it's a fun thing to do, I mean, it's lots of fun, but also because we have this social responsibility. I mean, how can we find common ground? How can we go beyond our fears or our really strong held opinions? So I rather contribute to constructive journalism than destructive journalism. To come back to Rwanda, let's just finish with this final thought of Aimable, the director of the program, and one of the scriptwriters, André.
Le processus de réconciliation demande beaucoup plus d'efforts. Faites attention aux paroles de haine, parce qu'il y a des paroles de haine qu'on peut écouter d'ici là. Maintenant, avec la technologie, avec les websites, les sites, maintenant les gens écrivent n'importe quoi. Beaucoup de choses. Et quand tu lis, ça c'est grave quand même, ça c'est grave. Quand on laisse quelqu'un dire ces imbéciles, ces cancres-là, ces animaux, ça peut créer quand même une certaine violence. Alors il faut faire attention. Il faut vraiment soigner son discours.
Ces messages sont toujours nécessaires parce que d'une part, le changement est un long processus. Le changement des comportements est un long processus. Et une société parfaite n'existe nulle part.
That was it.